The Elysium drifted through the cold abyss of space, its hull glowing faintly in the dark expanse far from the worlds, where humanity had found refuge. The massive ship was a relic of Earth, a ghost of a time long past, but to its crew it was their lifeline and their hope. Captain Callan Hawks stood on the bridge, staring at the distant stars with a brooding look etched across his face. He had inherited the command from his father, who had died under mysterious circumstances. When Callan was young, the ship had been adrift ever since, with only a vague directive to seek out Earth. The captain was not sure what they would find, but he knew that the time to find out was drawing near. The crew aboard the Elysium was a patchwork of human descendants from different colonies, scattered across the stars. They all carried with them the legacy of a lost world, and they had long been taught that Earth was but a myth, a place forgotten by time and erased by the conquerors of the galaxy, the Xerians, who had wiped out every trace of Earth's existence centuries ago. No one had dared speak of it, since the legend had faded into whispers, and then nothing but the Elysium remained as the last hope to uncover the truth and to possibly reclaim what was lost. As the ship cruised further into the uncharted reaches of space, a signal was detected, faint but distinct, a transmission buried deep in the static of distant frequencies. It was not random, it carried a pattern, and it was unmistakably human. Callan felt a chill run through him as he ordered the communications officer to decode the message. No one had expected anything to come of it. They had searched for years and found only silence. But now something was different. The transmission spoke of Earth. It used language and symbols that seemed ancient even to them. But Callan could understand enough to know it wasn't just a transmission, it was a warning. The message was clear. Earth had not been destroyed as they had believed. It had been hidden, and it was still there, waiting in the depths of space. The crew buzzed with disbelief and excitement as the gravity of the discovery sank in. Callan had spent his life hearing stories of Earth from his father, but he never truly believed it could be real. Now, the reality was inescapable. Their homeworld had not fallen to the void. It had been erased from history, hidden from all but a few who had kept the secret safe all these years. But why, and more importantly, where was it now? The captain's mind raced as the implications unfolded before him. If Earth was still out there, it would change everything. Their entire understanding of the galaxy and their place in it was about to be turned upside down. As Callan made his way to the ship's command center, the ship jolted slightly. The Elysium had been in motion for weeks, but now it seemed to have found its destination. The coordinates were not far from their current location, and the ship's systems had detected something large ahead, a vast and ancient object, a presence that should not exist, yet there it was. The crew had no time to process it as the ship's sensors were suddenly flooded with data. Callan's breath caught in his throat as the display before him lit up with the unmistakable shape of a massive warship looming in the distance. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its design was both elegant and terrifying. The markings on its hull were unmistakable. It was Xerian. The Elysium had not been alone all these years, and now the hunt had begun. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Elysium as the Xerian warship loomed large on the monitors. The crew stared in horror and disbelief. The Empire, the galaxy's most feared and ruthless conquerors, had been hunting Earth for centuries, and now they had found it. The Elysium was nothing more than a speck in comparison to the massive warship, its sleek black hull reflecting the cold stars around it. Callan's mind raced as he ordered the crew to initiate evasive maneuvers, but the ship's systems were still adjusting to the sudden arrival of this new enemy, and the warship's weapons powered up with chilling speed. The Xerian Empire had long been thought to be omnipotent. Its fleet, a dark shadow that stretched across the stars, its grip on the galaxy had been unchallenged for millennia. Yet the crew of the Elysium now realized they had stumbled upon the Empire's deepest secret. Earth was not just a lost world, it was the key to the Empire's eventual downfall. Its existence posed a threat that Xerians could not afford to let remain intact. The captain's voice was cold as he gave orders to the crew to prepare for battle. Every inch of the ship was ready for action, but the crew was uncertain. They had never faced an opponent like the Xerians before, let alone a fleet of their size and power. Callan's heart pounded as he watched the Xerian warship close the distance, the vastness of space between them shrinking with terrifying speed. The ship's sensors flickered, and the Elysium shuddered as the first volley of energy blasts struck their shields. The force of the impact rattled the ship, but the shields held for now. A tense silence followed as the crew braced for the next attack. Then the voice of Ensign Rhiannon Pierce, the ship's weapons officer, broke through the stillness. "Captain, I think we have a chance," she said, her fingers flying across the console. "I found an opening in their defenses. If we can exploit it, we might be able to disable their main weapons." Kalen's mind worked quickly. The plan was risky, but it was their only shot. "Do it," he ordered. "Give me everything you've got." He knew there was no turning back now. The Elysium was about to become the first human vessel to fight back against the Empire in centuries. Rhiannon's fingers danced across the console as she worked to line up the perfect shot, targeting the weak spot in the Tyrian warship's shields. Her heart raced as she fired the energy pulse. It shot across the distance between them with a brilliant flash of light and struck true. The Tyrian warship staggered under the blow, its shields faltering for just a moment. But it wasn't enough to take them down. The enemy was too powerful. "Brace for impact," Kalen shouted as the Syrians retaliated with a barrage of energy fire. The Elysium rocked with each blast, but it kept fighting back. Its systems now fully operational, the crew worked in unison to keep the ship intact as they fired back. With everything they had, the Elysium was not a warship. It wasn't designed for battle, but it was powerful in its own right, and it showed now as the crew used every bit of their expertise to outmaneuver and outthink the Tyrians. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Elysium held its ground, with the crew managing to inflict significant damage to the warship's outer hull. But just as victory seemed within reach, a second wave of Syrian ships appeared from the darkness of space surrounding them. The captain's mind raced. He realized that they were caught in a trap. A full Syrian fleet was closing in, and their chances of survival were rapidly diminishing. "Captain," the voice of the ship's engineer, Commander Eric Vallon, cut through the tension. "We need to jump now, or we'll be overwhelmed." Kalen glanced at the tactical display, knowing it was their only option. "Prepare the jump," he ordered, knowing they had to escape or face certain destruction. The Elysium's engines roared to life as the ship slipped space drive charge. As the warship closed in for the final blow, the Elysium leaked into slip space, vanishing from the battlefield just as the enemy unleashed their devastating firepower. The crew exhaled collectively, a moment of relief, but the threat was far from over. The Syrians had found them, and now they knew what humanity had hidden for so long. Earth was no longer a secret, and the Empire's wrath would come for them with all the fury it could muster. The Elysium emerged from slip space into the vast emptiness of uncharted space, its engines humming softly as the crew struggled to regain their bearings. Callan Hawke stood at the bridge's helm, his mind clouded with the implications of what had just transpired. The Syrian fleet was not just a threat to their survival. It was a sign that Earth was more than just a forgotten homeworld. It was a target the Empire would stop at nothing to reclaim. The captain's pulse quickened as his thoughts spiraled out of control. Earth had been hidden for so long, and now the galaxy's most ruthless empire knew where to find it. He turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Maris Velen, who was scanning the ship's systems for any signs of damage. "Status report," he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. "We're intact, Captain," Maris replied, her eyes flickering over the consoles. "Shields are stable, engines are fully operational, but we've lost some secondary systems from the battle. The weapons are offline for now, but we can still move." She paused, looking up. "There's something else, though. We've been receiving strange signals since the jump. It's not Syrian, it's human, and it's not random." Kellen felt his stomach tighten. The signals were too precise to be a mere glitch. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Ferris Kale, had been working tirelessly to decrypt them, but now the signs of something far more significant began to emerge on the screens in front of them. Kellen stepped forward and studied the data lines running across the console. "Look at this," Ferris said, pointing to the frequency on the display. "It's Earth's old military encryption, a pattern from the old colonial defense network. Not only that, but it's a direct message addressed to Elysium. It's asking us to find Earth, but with a specific set of instructions. how to decode Earth's final location, and a warning that the Syrians are close. The captain's heart pounded as the enormity of what they had stumbled upon hit him. Earth's history had been erased from the collective memory, and now someone on Earth, or someone with knowledge of Earth, had left this cryptic trail for them to follow, as if anticipating this very moment. The message is encoded in layers, Ferris continued. There are coordinates buried in the encryption itself, but I can't get through the final block without the key. This looks like it was designed to hide its true nature even from us. Callan leaned closer as his mind worked through the pieces of the puzzle. Earth's defense networks had been powerful before the fall, but who would have the means to leave such a message after so many centuries? Callan felt a surge of urgency. He needed answers, but they were running out of time. He turned to his crew. "We need that key," he said firmly. "If Earth is truly out there, we need to find it now before the Empire does." The ship's bridge fell into a focused silence as the crew scrambled to crack the code. Maris and Ferris worked in tandem, their minds moving like clockwork, breaking down the layers of encryption. Minutes stretched into hours, the weight of their mission hanging heavy on their shoulders. Then, just as they thought the key might be out of reach, Ferris' voice broke through the tension. "I've got it," he said in disbelief. "The final layer is a map. It's showing us Earth's location in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, a place no one could have possibly found before now. And the final warning. It says the Syrians are already preparing to launch an invasion force." Callan's breath caught in his chest. Earth was not just a place, it was a weapon, and the Empire knew it. He turned to the rest of his crew who had been listening intently. "We're not just racing to find Earth anymore," Callan said, his voice steady with resolve. "We're racing to prevent a war that could destroy everything we've worked for." The crew understood the gravity of their task, and without another word they set to work, ready to face the Empire and uncover the truth of humanity's legacy, buried deep within the forgotten homeworld. The Elysium hurtled through deep space, its engines humming steadily. As the crew absorbed the gravity of their newfound mission, Earth was no longer a distant myth but a tangible reality, and the Syrians were already preparing to annihilate it once and for all. Callan stood in the command center, staring at the star maps flickering on the screen before him. Earth's coordinates were locked in, and they were dangerously close to the Empire's borders. But with the Elysium now fully functional, and the crew working in unison, they had a chance, though it was a slim one. Callan's thoughts raced as he tried to plan their next move, but the pressure of the situation weighed on him heavier than ever before. The Syrian Empire was not a foe that could be easily outsmarted, even with the advantage of Earth's mysterious legacy. The Empire's intelligence network was vast and efficient, and they had likely been tracking the Elysium ever since they encountered the warship in the previous battle. In fact, it wasn't just the Elysium that was at risk anymore. It was everything humanity had fought for. The colonies scattered across the stars would also be in danger, should the Syrians learn the full extent of what Earth contained. Captain Maris's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "We've just intercepted a transmission from an unknown source. It's Syrian, but not one of their main fleets. This signal's originating from inside the Empire itself." Callan's interest peaked. He turned toward her. "What is it?" Maris looked up from her console with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "It's from General Torren of the Fifth Fleet," she said slowly. "He's making contact with us. Or at least with you specifically. He claims he wants to defect." Callan's brow furrowed. This was unexpected and highly suspicious, but the desperation in Maris's voice told him this was not a time to dismiss anything. "Patch it through," Callan ordered, his voice tight. A moment later, the face of General Torren appeared on the screen, an older Xyrian, his eyes weary but resolute. He was seated in a dark room somewhere in the heart of the Empire, but the tension in his posture was undeniable. "This is General Torren of the Fifth Fleet," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Captain Hawk, you don't know me, but you know of my reputation. I've led countless campaigns for the Emperor and helped expand the Tyrian Empire to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. But now I see the truth, and I cannot ignore it any longer. Earth is not just a world, it's the key to everything the Emperor has been hiding for centuries." Kalen's mind raced, but he kept his composure. "Why are you contacting me now?" he asked. "What do you want?" The general's gaze hardened. "I want to help you destroy the Empire before it can consume everything. The weapon on Earth is too powerful for any one person, or any one empire to control. If you don't stop the Emperor now, it will be the end for everyone." Kalen exchanged a glance with Maris. The idea of allying with a Syrian traitor was unsettling, but there was something in Toran's eyes that told him he wasn't lying. "What do you propose?" Kalen asked carefully. Toran's face hardened as he spoke. "I can provide you with the intel you need to get past the Empire's defenses, but we need to move quickly. The Emperor has already mobilized his fleets to Earth. They will strike within days. If we don't act soon, the galaxy will be consumed by war." Kalen's hands clenched into fists as he considered the offer. Could he trust the general? Could he risk everything on the word of an enemy who had once been part of the machine that had hunted his people for centuries? But the fact remained that they had no other options. Earth was a ticking time bomb, and they couldn't afford to wait. "All right," Kalen said finally. "We'll take your help, but know this: if you're lying, we will stop you no matter what." Toran nodded grimly. "Understood, Captain." With the general's help, the crew of the Elysium now had a chance to reach Earth before the Empire could act. But as the ship sped toward its destination, Kalen couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were being drawn into something far larger than any of them had imagined. The Syrian Empire was crumbling under its own weight, its internal factions growing more divided and desperate each day. But even as it fractured, it became all the more dangerous, desperate to maintain control over the ancient power Earth held. The Elysium was no longer just on a mission to reclaim a lost world. It had become the last hope of the galaxy and the first spark of a new war that would change everything forever. The Elysium soared through the endless night of space, its engines roaring as they pushed the ship toward Earth's last known location. Kalen Hawk stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the screens that displayed the star map before him. He felt the weight of the mission pressing down on him. With each passing minute, Earth was so close now, but the closer they got, the more the threat of the Syrian Empire loomed over them. General Toran's intel had been invaluable, revealing gaps in the Empire's defenses and giving them a fighting chance. But Kalen knew the fight would not be easy. The Syrians would not allow their greatest secret to be lost without a bloody battle. As the crew prepared for the final stretch of their journey, tensions were running high on the Elysium. The ship had been in constant motion for days, and the crew was exhausted, but there was no time to rest. They were about to face the greatest challenge of their lives. If the Tyrians had truly mobilized an invasion force, they would be arriving at Earth soon, and once they did, there would be no turning back. Kalen's thoughts were filled with the urgency of the moment. Every decision now carried the weight of their survival. Captain Maris's voice broke through his thoughts. "We've detected a large fleet signature ahead. It's not just one ship. There's an entire armada moving in fast. They're coming for Earth." Kalen's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the star map once more and confirmed the readings. It wasn't just one fleet. It was a full Syrian invasion force ready to strike. He turned to his crew, his voice sharp and commanding. "Red alert battle stations now." Kalen ordered, his hands gripping the edge of his console. "Activate all weapons and shields. Prepare for immediate combat. We will not let them take Earth." The Elysium shook as the weapons systems powered up, and the crew scrambled to their posts. A heavy silence filled the bridge as everyone waited for the inevitable clash. As the Syrian fleet appeared on the sensors, Kalen's eyes narrowed. Earth was now the epicenter of the galaxy's future, and he would defend it at all costs. The first Syrian ships appeared on the horizon, massive warships with sleek obsidian hulls, their engines blazing with destructive intent. The Elysium was outnumbered and outgunned, but they had one advantage: speed and maneuverability. The ship was not built for head-on confrontations, but it could outmaneuver the larger warships and exploit weaknesses in their formation. Kalen's voice rang out across the bridge. "We need to hit them fast and hard. Do not engage in a prolonged fight. We'll strike at their command ships and take down their leadership. If we can break their coordination, the rest of their fleet will fall apart." The crew nodded in understanding, and within moments, they were moving into position. Ryan Pierce's voice cut through the tension. Targeting the lead command ship, now Captain. We'll have a clean shot in 30 seconds. Kalen's pulse quickened as he watched the massive fleet draw closer to Earth. The fate of the galaxy rested in their hands. He held his breath as Ryan launched the first volley of energy fire. A concentrated burst of plasma shot across the void and struck the Xerian command ship directly. The ship's shields flared under the attack, but they held firm for the moment. Direct hit, Captain, but it's not enough, Ryan called out. Their shields are holding strong. We need to breach their hull to disable their weapons. Kalen's mind raced as the Elysium closed the distance with the Xerian fleet. The larger ships were turning to engage them, but the Elysium was nimble. It twisted and darted between the enemy vessels, avoiding their weapons and striking with precision. Kalen gave the order to focus fire on the weak points in the enemy ships' hulls. He knew that if they could pierce the defenses of the command ship, they might be able to disrupt the entire fleet's operations. Then came the signal from General Torren's contact, an encrypted message with vital information. The central command ship's core is the weakest point. Torren's voice came through the comms. If you can disable it, the fleet will lose coordination completely, but hurry. The Emperor's personal fleet is closing in to reinforce them. Kalen's grip tightened on the console as the Elysium continued to dodge and weave through the incoming fire. Understood, Torren. We're moving in for the kill. The crew's eyes were fixed on their monitors as they adjusted their course. The Elysium was now locked in a deadly dance with the Xerian warships, every maneuver critical, every decision a life or death moment. Ryan's voice rang out once more. Ready to fire, Captain. We'll have a direct hit on the core in 30 seconds. Do it, Kalen ordered, his voice unwavering. The Elysium surged forward, its weapons locked and loaded. The energy pulse fired across the distance, striking the core of the Xerian command ship. With a brilliant flash of light, the ship's shields buckled, and the hull cracked open as the blast tore through it, sending shockwaves through the fleet. For a moment, everything went still. The Xerian warships faltered, their communication systems scrambling as their flagship's leadership was torn apart. Then chaos erupted. The Xerian fleet struggled to regroup, losing cohesion without their command ship, and the tide of battle began to shift. But Kalen knew this was just the beginning. Earth's fate was still in the balance, and the fight was far from over. The chaos on the battlefield was deafening. Xerian ships, now disorganized and leaderless, scrambled to regain control of the situation. The Elysium had dealt a significant blow, but Kalen Hawk knew it was far from over. The strike on the command ship had disrupted the Xerian fleet, but the Emperor's personal armada was still approaching. If they didn't act quickly, Earth would still fall into enemy hands. Kalen stood tall in the command center, his eyes scanning the chaotic display of battle tactics and the ever-expanding enemy fleet on the radar. The crew had given everything, but the Elysium was still outnumbered, and the reinforcements on the way would tip the balance back in the Xerians' favor. Captain, their reinforcements are only minutes away, Maris reported, her voice tense. We can't keep dodging forever. Kalen clenched his fists. He had known this was coming. He had always known that defeating the Xerians wouldn't be a simple victory. They were fighting for survival now, and it was not just the Elysium at risk. The very idea of Earth was in jeopardy, the last hope of humanity in a galaxy dominated by empires, greed, and destruction. We have one chance, Kalen said, his voice steady despite the rising tension. He looked at his crew, each of them feeling the weight of his words. We're going to fight back, as though this is the final battle. Kalen continued, his voice hardening with resolve. We strike at the heart of the Xerian fleet. We target their flagship, and we disable their communications. Without it, the reinforcements won't know where to go, and we'll have time to regroup. His crew looked at him with steely determination. No more hesitation. No more fear. They were no longer just defending Earth. They were defending everything that humanity stood for. Ryan, get us into position, Kalen ordered, his eyes never leaving the approaching fleet. Take us as close as you can to the flagship without getting torn apart. We hit them hard, fast, and then we fall back." The Elysium surged forward, its engines roaring as it closed the distance with the flagship. The Xurian ships on the perimeter tried to move to intercept, but Callan knew they wouldn't be able to stop the ship in time. His pulse raced as he felt the ship slip through the cracks in their formation. "Firing now," Rhiannon called out, her voice cold with focus. The ship's weapons fired in rapid succession, missiles and plasma shots ripping through the darkness, striking their targets with brutal efficiency. The flagship's shields flickered, faltered, and finally cracked under the assault. The Elysium maneuvered closer, expertly dodging the return fire, but it was a constant battle to keep the ship intact. The warships surrounding the flagship began to converge, eager to defend their command, but Callan knew they had one moment. One single opening to strike before the full force of the Xurian armada descended on them. "We're in position, Captain," Rhiannon reported, her voice tense but steady. Callan nodded. "Engage the core. Hit it with everything we've got. Disable their communications." The Elysium launched another round of missiles, the most powerful shots they had, aimed directly at the flagship's core. The explosion rocked the ship, sending shockwaves throughout the battlefield, and the flagship's hull cracked open. But the Xurians weren't finished. A final furious barrage of fire rained down on the Elysium, shaking the ship violently. "Shields are down to 10%. Maris shouted. "We can't take much more of this. Pull back," Callan ordered, gripping the console in front of him as the ship shuddered under the assault. "Get us out of here now." Rhiannon turned the wheel, navigating them away from the core of the battle, as the Elysium made a hard evasive maneuver, diving into the darkness of space. For a moment, the bridge was filled with only the sound of the ship's engines straining under the pressure. Then, after a tense silence, Callan exhaled. "We've bought time, but not much," he said, his eyes fixed on the fading image of the Xurian flagship. The comms were silent for a moment before the voice of General Torin came through. "You did it," Torin said, a rare note of admiration in his voice. "The fleet is scattered. They've lost communication. The Emperor's reinforcements are on their own, and they don't know where to strike." Callan took a deep breath, though he knew this was far from over. The battle for Earth was still raging, and the Xurians would not rest. But for the first time since they had discovered the truth about Earth, Callan allowed himself a flicker of hope. They had made their stand, and they had given Earth the chance it needed to survive. "Now we finish this," Callan said grimly. "Prepare for the final push." The Elysium drifted in the cold vacuum of space, its engines barely a whisper as the crew caught their breath after the brutal battle. The Xurian flagship had been crippled, and the reinforcements had lost their bearings without a leader to guide them, but Earth's salvation was still a distant dream. The Xurians would regroup, Callan Hawk knew that. The Empire had been on the verge of collapse for years, but its grasp was still suffocating, and the Emperor's personal fleet would not let Earth slip through their fingers. Callan stood at the helm, his gaze locked on the star charts ahead. The Elysium had dealt a blow, but it hadn't ended the war. Not yet. There were still countless Xurian ships scattered across the galaxy, and all it would take was one to warn the Emperor that his power was in danger. "We need to strike before they can organize again," Callan said, his voice as hard as steel. "We've drawn their attention, but they haven't seen what we're truly capable of. We're not running anymore. We're going to hit them where it hurts the most, the heart of their empire." Maris nodded from her station, her eyes flicking over the tactical data. "If we're going after the Emperor's capital, we'll have to go deep into their territory. We'll be on the offensive this time, and that means we'll need everything we've got. The Xurians will be expecting us." Rhiannon leaned in from her console, her fingers dancing across the ship's systems. "We've got just enough resources to push forward. Weapons are at 50%, shields at 70%. We'll need to be quick." Callan turned to Ferris Kale, the communications officer, who had been working tirelessly to track the Empire's movements. Ferris, anything we can use to our advantage. Ferris nodded, tapping his screen. I've intercepted some chatter. The Emperor's capital fleet is preparing for a final push to Earth. But there's a small window before they engage. If we strike now, we might be able to catch them off guard. Then that's our target, Kalen said, determination flooding his voice. Set course for the Emperor's capital. We strike fast, disable their fleet, and leave no trace. It's our last chance to stop them from wiping out everything. The crew moved in unison, their fingers flying over consoles, their focus absolute. The Elysium began to shift into position, the crew feeling the weight of Kalen's words. If they failed, Earth would fall, and humanity would be wiped from the galaxy for good. The Emperor's fleets were vast, but the Elysium had the speed and precision to get in and out before the Empire could respond. As they neared the heart of the Xurian Empire, Kalen's thoughts grew heavy. They were entering enemy territory, deep within the heart of a civilization that had once been feared across the stars. Now it was crumbling, its power fractured and divided. But the Xurians were still formidable, and there was no certainty in the plan ahead. Every move they made now was a gamble, one that could tip the scale in favor of humanity, or lead to its complete annihilation. We've got the coordinates, Maris called out, breaking Kalen's reverie. We're approaching the capital fleet now. Prepare for anything. Kalen exhaled slowly. Everyone knows their role. Rhiannon, keep us light and fast. We hit the capital fleet hard and disable their flagship. If we can't destroy it, we'll cripple it. Ferris, keep us updated on the Emperor's movements. We need to know what we're walking into. As the Elysium flew toward the capital fleet, Kalen could feel the weight of his decisions press on him. This was no longer just about surviving. It was about reshaping the future of the galaxy, and it rested in their hands. The ship's hull hummed under him as they pushed forward, hurtling into the darkness of enemy space. And then, in an instant, the Elysium was upon them. The capital fleet loomed ahead, its ships like shadows against the backdrop of distant stars. The massive flagship, a towering vessel of Xurian power, stood in the center, its sleek form cutting through the void like a knife. Here we go, Kalen muttered under his breath. We're within range, Rhiannon called. Targeting the flagship now. Kalen gave the order, and the Elysium fired. The weapons discharged with brutal force, striking the flagship's shields and sending ripples through the surrounding ships. But it wasn't enough. The flagship's shields held firm. We need more firepower, Kalen said, a fierce edge in his voice. All weapons on that flagship. Now. The Elysium's weapon systems blazed to life, pouring everything they had into the enemy vessel. The blasts hit harder this time, weakening the flagship's defenses, but the return fire was overwhelming. The Xurian fleet began to regroup, preparing to strike back with deadly force. Kalen's heart raced, knowing this would be their last chance. The Emperor's reign was coming to an end, one way or another. The battle raged in the cold void of space, each moment stretching into eternity. The Elysium danced around the Xurian capital fleet, dodging plasma bolts and returning fire with unrelenting fury. Kalen Hawk gripped the command console, his eyes fixed on the Xurian flagship, now battered but still standing. The strike had weakened its shields, but the flagship was far from defeated. They had pushed as hard as they could, but the Xurians weren't backing down. Rhiannon's voice broke through the cacophony of alarms and weapons fire. Shields are holding, Captain, but we've only got a few more hits left before we're wide open. We need to end this now. Kalen's mind raced as he calculated their options. They were in deep, too deep, and the only way to finish this would be to cripple the heart of the Empire. It was their final gamble. Maris, target their engine core, Kalen ordered. Take out their propulsion. If we disable their ability to move, the rest of the fleet will lose its strategic advantage. We'll be able to tear them apart. Maris's fingers flew over the controls, and the Elysium lurched as it made a hard turn toward the flagship's exposed engines. The Syrians' defenses were formidable, but their focus had shifted to the Elysium's relentless assault. They had underestimated the ship's maneuverability, and now it was their weakness. The Elysium darted in close, its weapons unleashing a final barrage aimed directly at the heart of the Syrian flagship's engines. Kalen's pulse quickened as the energy blast connected. A blinding flare erupted from the flagship, and the mighty vessel trembled under the force of the strike. For a moment, everything went still. Then, the flagship's propulsion systems failed, and the massive ship drifted helplessly, its weapons gone silent. "Direct hit," Maris shouted, her voice filled with triumph. "They're losing power. Their engines are down." Kalen's heart skipped a beat as the reality of their victory began to sink in. The flagship was no longer a threat. The Syrian fleet, now without its flagship and its command structure, was in disarray. The Emperor's forces were scattered, their coordination shattered. The Elysium had broken the backbone of the Empire. But they were not done yet. Kalen looked to Ferris, who had been monitoring the Empire's communications. "Ferris, get me a channel to the Emperor. I want him to hear this." Ferris hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'm opening a direct line, Captain. It's secure." The comm screen flickered, and the face of Emperor Sorek appeared, his cold, calculating eyes staring through the screen. His once imposing presence now seemed diminished, like a cornered beast. His voice, however, remained as venomous as ever. "You think you've won, Captain Hawk," the Emperor sneered. "You've only delayed the inevitable. The Empire will rise again. Your Earth will fall, just as every other world that defies us has." Kalen stood tall, unwavering. He met the Emperor's gaze, his voice calm but firm. "You've miscalculated, Sorek. Your empire is crumbling. Your fleets are scattered, and Earth will no longer be your target." The Emperor's expression darkened, but Kalen could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The Emperor had always ruled through fear, but now it was fear that was gripping him. "You'll never stop us," the Emperor growled. "Perhaps," Kalen said, his voice rising with conviction. "But today, we've shown that there's another way. We don't need your empire, and we certainly don't need your oppression. The galaxy has outgrown you." With that, Kalen gave the order. The Elysium fired one final shot, a devastating blast that severed the communications link with the Emperor. His image disappeared from the screen, and for the first time in years, silence reigned. Kalen exhaled slowly, his mind racing with the enormity of what they had just accomplished. The war was not yet over, but the Empire had been crippled. The path to Earth's survival, and the survival of countless other worlds, had been cleared. As the crew looked around at each other, they knew that their fight was far from over. The Syrians were still a threat, and there were many battles to come. But today, they had taken a decisive step forward. They had shown the galaxy that even the mightiest empire could fall, and that hope could still rise from the ashes. The Elysium turned back toward Earth, its mission far from complete, but for the first time, Kalen felt a spark of hope. The dawn of a new era had begun.